For those of you who don't know me, I'm the American guy who's also interested in ethics. I'm director of the Software Engineering Ethics Research Institute, and I'm also the chair of the ACM Committee on Professional Ethics. That is a committee which, for the ACM, supports and promotes ethics. I'm going to try and do one thing today, and one thing only. I'm going to try and support a claim that I have, that being a professional requires professionalism. Fairly simple claim. Being a professional requires professionalism. But of course, I have definitions of those words, which I need to persuade you about in order to make this particular case. Now, the ACM, like most computing organizations, is slightly, I shouldn't say it this way, we're recording this, slightly schizophrenic. That is, it has different points of view. They think professionalism is important. I'm a member of some committees that are working on professionalism, but at the same time there was a recent article in a magazine called Inroads, and in that article, the title of the article, I'm sorry you can't read it, it says, "Is computing an emerging profession?" Now, this person's argument in this particular paper is that no, it's not, and professionals go through this particular area, but there is this sign that you can't read, and it says, "Computing professionals not welcome." I'm sorry, computing people not welcome. Okay, so there's this diversity of views that we have. Now, when we talk about professionalization in ICT, it's a cottage industry. Everybody is doing it. We have I love this alphabet soup, ACM, BCS, IFIP, ISAC, lots of groups doing it. CEPIS is working on it, and so on. And the question is, in the US, they're talking about licensing computer professionals. 10 states in the US are dealing with this. And the question is, why are we doing this particular thing? And it's obviously to prevent the harm. You don't want your cell phone going off too loud. You don't want your cell phone waking you into sleep, or all these kinds of things. And so we have, in fact, IFIP has come out with a report on this about increasing the pervasiveness of ICT has the potential to harm our economy and society. Now you notice the first word, and the sequence of this is significant, okay? So when we talk about harm, most of us think about safety critical things. I just flew over, you worry about the airplane landing, you worry about the pilot going a little crazy and driving you into a mountain, but we're coming to Holland, so a mountain wasn't a problem. Sorry. Prevent harm, when we talk about it, is also beyond merely safety critical programs. I mean, we talk about information and how information is characterized. Now I'm going to bring in some personal elements since Declan said the story. I used to live in a place called Southern California, okay? Los Angeles, big city, and I used to live here in Culver City and used to commute to USC on this particular thing. Now we had young kids, and one of the things that was decided is that there are pedophiles who are especially bad people. And so if you knew where the pedophiles lived, we could make you safe from the pedophiles because you'd know a pedophile was there. So the answer is to develop a software database. And this is the pedophile database. Now, mind you, we lived here and our kids walked to school there. So if you visit, and you can here in Holland visit the California Megan's Law pedophile database. And you see this picture. We lived here, and the blue indicators are where the pedophiles lived. The simple question is, did that protect me from pedophiles in any way? I've never shown my wife this picture. Okay? You could click on any one of these and you would get a picture of the pedophile, a history and a description of all of the interesting things they did. But when you think about it, you're looking at this piece of software, and from a functional perspective, did it protect anybody? They didn't consider the context in which this thing was being put. What's the danger of this particular thing? Well, there are several pedophile databases, and you find out that at least in one case, people looked at this and found out that somebody lived in Flatbush, an area of Brooklyn, on a particular street, Spring Street. They went and broke into the house on Spring Street and gave that person, an American expression, what for? You shouldn't be pedophile-ish and you shouldn't live in our area. The thing that they didn't pay attention to was the full address on this iPhone app. Sydney, Australia. Flatbush, Sydney, Australia. A result of this piece of software where the context was left out. So we have all sorts of harm that can be created, but that's all right. IP3, that's an organization from IFIP that's developing professionalism. They want it because it will help our economy. If we have professionals, it's a good thing because we'll produce better products. Now, if we talk about the hallmarks of professionalism, there are a group of them, and you find them in ethics books and in professional organizations, CEPIS, the EU Professionalism Project. Talk about this variety of things. First, you have systematic and advanced knowledge. You have to know about computing to be a computing professional. You have to know about building web pages to be a web page professional. There's some judgments you're going to make about how to build a system. So you ought to be able to make the judgment rather than having me say, gee, I like COBOL, so I'd like you to write the telephone application in COBOL. Okay? There ought to be some type of licensing and certification. Professional organizations come in here, governments come in here, and so on. We ought to have a skill set that's proven by experience, by testing, by degrees, and so on. It ought to be, to show you have a profession, there ought to be a professional organization. In the US, the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association, the British Computer Society. There ought to be a code of conduct, the way in which you behave. I'm not intentionally going to hurt you, or something like that. And then there's this interesting notion about a profession. When we talk about professions, they have mostly been service industries. That is, doctors are a profession, because their job is to help you in some sense or other. That's understood. Now, it's tricky, the next one I'm about to say. Lawyers, barristers, are a profession because their job is to smooth the flow of social and economic interchange and all of this. Okay, what happens is this notion of a profession gets reduced to a dangerous view. That a profession means you're a professional if you possess a particular set of technical skills. And what happens is the reduction is to a skill set. Okay? I can be a profession without having professionalism if I know how to type on the computer, if I know how to write in C++. The author of that article I cited earlier makes a mistake and says, professions as we know them were creations of Victorian creations, brought into being to serve the needs of an industrial society. It's just technical stuff to make the machines work better. Okay? That, I think, is a mistaken view. This gent ends up arguing that computing folk can't become a profession because we have difficulty in certifying and coming to agreement about what the tests would be to prove that you were a good computing professional. Okay. Still that a complex job is the standard. Now, why am I a little bit anxious about that? Because I consider this something called the competence creation fallacy. If I can do something with a computer and make it work, that's okay, I'm a professional. the sense of competent creation. I've got the thing done well. I've made this mouse changer flipper so that it can work to change the slides easily. Good job, professional, nice work. Competent creation requires skill at doing this kind of stuff. Now, when we talk about professionalism, what happens is that it started out with some monks and so on having particular views about professing a particular faith and so on. And then it eventually became having some specialized skill and knowledge that required training. Okay, so I'm a professional computer person, ICT person, whatever you say, if I can make a computer do X. So X is a variable, right? So let me give you some examples of what X might be. I've had enormous difficulty with my eyes. I've had eye surgery and so on, and the world has come around much better for me. But while I was having this difficulty, this wonderful thing called the Kindle came along. And one of the things it would let you do is, if you happen to be going blind, you could increase the text by selecting a size you could read, right? So this was great. You come home from eye surgery and you're ready to read on your Kindle and finish that book that you can't read that small print in paperback anymore. And what happens is, the way in which you get to do that is to press the key on the Kindle keyboard. See the Kindle keyboard over here? That has an upper and lower case A on it. The size of that key is about the size of the end of my pencil. And it's got an upper and lower case A on it. Tell me which key I press. And you've got good vision, right? This is a failed project. How do I get the size of the font to change? This is a simple X. I have the technical skills to change the font size. Let me give you a different kind of case. There's an X-ray machine called the Therac 25 that had all sorts of interesting adventures to it. The Therac 25 had a source up there that would issue lots of radiation. And you'd put people in a position here, and this is my non-technical science short version of it. And what would happen is, so that they wouldn't get roasted, you'd slide a filter in place, and when the filter is in place, you'd set the thing off when everything was okay, and it would fire some filtered radiation and take care of tumors. Wonderful thing to do, benefit mankind, right? Get rid of some of these cancers. Well, the system was designed. What a wonderful thing to do. Now, the people who designed it used the standard QWERTY keyboard. You press an X for the X-ray, and if the setting was wrong and the shield wasn't in place, you'd cancel it. So you'd press a C. Do you notice the position of these two keys? X-ray, if the filter's in place. Cancel it if you're going to kill that person. And send 20,000 rads, which is lethal, to them. Partly, the choice of this design was one of the critical issues that led to 6 deaths. Press an X and C worked, X-ray, clear or cancel, right? They had the skill. They would be classified professionals. Whoa. Okay. From this, I'm not going to bore you with 1,000 of examples.
I have to oppose. I mean,
oppose what?
They didn't have the skills, because they did the concurrency part wrong.
You're building some things into skills which are not totally built into them. It's part of what I'm thinking. Okay. It's easy to say, I can give you 100 examples, and for 50 of them you'll say, they didn't do it right because they missed this. There was concurrency issues. However, there was an interface design issue, which is a pretty, have you ever pressed an X instead of a C when you've typed?
Yes, sure.
Okay. That's all I meant.
Okay, I buy what you are saying. I just wanted to say is no.
There were 100 problems with this particular software.
skills.
One of them would have been if they pressed X-ray and then they pressed stop or something. Just get some distance. They didn't think in this particular piece of the design about the context. Okay, so now we can talk about, we need ethics to help guide things. We need some kind of thinking about the people who are under the X-ray, thinking about the person who's going to expand the thing and what their eyes are like and so on. So we need this stuff called ethics. Now, one of the things most of us know who had ethics in college is you take a course where you read about a lot of dead old guys. Oh, you know, and especially dead old white guys. Okay? And this is an academic discipline, and I have Aristotle's Ethics on a bookshelf. It's on the very top bookshelf I can't reach anymore, and it's probably got a lot of dust up there. That's where you can put the ethics. Or we have a code of ethics. The ACM had...
I can borrow this.
Okay. The ACM has a code of ethics. The Dutch Computer Society has a code of ethics. I tried to access it, and it's in Dutch. Buried someplace. We talk about ethics as everyone has an opinion. Now, that's ethics as this lump that lies there. Now, my talk says the word applied. I want to talk about applied ethics, where we may attempt to take some broad principles which characterize behavior. Now, the argument becomes, well, which of these guys is the best? The greatest good for the greatest number? Do your duty and tell the truth no matter what? Take special care of the least advantaged? Ask what an ideal practitioner would do. This is all ethics stuff, okay? And, but one of the problems we have is, why is ethics the quiet part? Because we're all good people. I'm not a bad person. Maybe I talk too much, but I'm not a bad person in general, okay? There are common elements. You know, we're all human beings. So we know pretty much we shouldn't be hurting one another. A really tricky principle, right? We ought to be honest with one another. I ought to be fair to people and so on. And we know how to be ethical professionals. So why is Declan bothering us with this meeting? Okay. Well, I have two answers. One answer has to do with the models of being a professional. There is a model of being a professional called an agency model, which says, you ask me to do something, fire the machine with an X or fire it with the C, sure, I can do that. Easy, I'll do what you ask me to do it. I'll build whatever you want. Another is, I'm a heck of a lot smarter than you are about computing, so you may think you want to do it this way, but let me tell you what you need to do. That notion is called paternalism, okay? So let's consider another X, called changing the font size. I apologize for my interest in these, but these have a particular self-related issue, okay? Here's the accessibility wizard in something called a Microsoft operating system. So if you want to change the font size, you go to the accessibility wizard, and you click right here, and you click next. And then there's this wonderful thing that comes up. It says, I can read this one. Click the one you can read. Okay, that's a little too small. Yeah, that's the one I can read. I can't read that one. So you click it. So now your font is going to come out that size, right? Because that's what you can see. Beautiful. And the instructions that you get after you click this are over here. Do you notice something about the font size of the instructions about how to implement it?
It's smaller than smaller.
I can't read those bloody instructions. Now you laughed at that because I set you up. That's absurd, right? Well, if I can only read this font, can I read that? That even gets me there. Look at the absurdity of the accessibility functions in lots of the operating systems. You can't use them because you have an accessibility challenge. and they're not designed to get you into it. Here's another X where the context wasn't thought about. Competent creation. Does it change the size ultimately of the text? You betcha. Does the Kindle change the size of the text? You betcha. So I've created it. Does pressing the X fire the X-ray? You betcha. Does pressing the C can? Competent creation, delivered on time, within budget, and so you talk about these kinds of issues, okay? What happens is, competent creation is not something that I characterize as professionalism. Professionalism includes something more in the application of these technical skills. I think it includes the ethical and social decisions, okay? Knowledge is insufficient for me to define what a professional is. Testing the skill set and declaring someone, I baptize thee professional, is a mistake. Okay. There's another view of the model of how you approach professionalism called paternalism. That's dad knows best, I'm the computer professional, I know best, so I'm going to tell you how you ought to do things. And what happens is both of these things tend to ignore the context of what goes on. Agency and paternalism, you have the customer's desires, you have the professional skills, and you leave out the professional judgment about whether you worried about concurrency or not when you're asked that question. Okay. That's professional judgment. You objected immediately. Yes. Worry about responsibility. What's the context this system is going in? How is it going to be installed on a computer chip? Oh, my pacemaker's on a computer chip? You mean it moves too fast for making certain kinds of decisions? What are the impacts? I have an insulin pump. The insulin pump sends a message to my mom over unencrypted software. Ooh, there are people in the world who think things are fun. Who are the stakeholders in the design of this insulin pump message? And you leave out the person wearing the bloody pump. Okay. I mean, this is what happens. Okay, we talk about professional responsibility as a word I used. I think responsibility has multiple simple levels. The one simple level is we have responsibility toward one another just based on our humanity. Another level is I'm telling you I have some special skills, I'm a professional. So I make an agreement that I'm going to provide these skills to you to do something positive. Then there's this third level that says, I'm an IT professional developing real-time systems. I'm going to worry about concurrency and how it impacts you. I'm an IT professional developing information systems, letting you know where pedophiles are. Well, am I going to attract attention all over the world to all of the pedophiles in California so you can sit here and use them as an example in your lecture, Don? Yeah. Okay. Now what happens is there's technical skills and there's ethics. And we have this real problem because the ethics has been left in a pile. And that's dumb. Any professional ethical decision you make involves ethical judgments. You're not going to go to your Bible and look up what should I be doing with Twitter, what should I be doing with Instagram, but you're going to make ethical judgments about how pictures are going to be saved, what tracking Google can do, what tracking some companies can do. And thinking that these two things are separate leads to failed projects. I gave you 3 simple examples a minute ago. Thinking that the ethics, you don't have to worry about, well, how are you going to feel when you can't enlarge the font size? I don't care, I was told to just enlarge the font size. That's my job. No, it makes a difference, especially if you're a pilot or something like that. The way systems are built have ethical impacts. All right, professionalism, professionals and failed professionalism. Okay? Here are these examples, and in order to avoid these examples, increasing the font size and so on, you have to worry about something that isn't about the particular do loop you use, or the until, or the switch, or the whatever statement, or whether you have green or yellow on the interface. You have to worry about the potential ethical and social risks. Okay. That's what you have to worry about. Well, why are these problems? We're good people. We're just using our personal vigilance. Obviously, that person should have been concerned about the race conditions and so on. And the way in which we use personal vigilance, a general sort of list here. What you need to do is to identify what the risks are, see what caused the issue, and fix those kinds of things. Right? But what happens is, personal vigilance has some problems. Sometimes we think there's only one solution. We're the technician and we know the answer. Okay? And it is the answer. Professionalism. Minimize who the stakeholders are, not seeing who the people are who are affected and so on. So we can address some of these issues. But there's a more basic problem. And the more basic problem is something about us. It's an issue called framing. And what we do when we frame things is we make our issues simpler by putting a very tight focus on them. And in putting this tight focus, we ignore critical issues, okay? So we have some business goals. Be competent, be successful, and then we have some ethics goals. Be fair and don't hurt people. Well, if I frame something purely in business goals, are you making more money? Yeah, but I'm killing all the people in the slums. Oh, that's right, you're making money. This is the framing stuff. What happens when you focus on one set of goals is the other set of goals totally disappear. Okay, so this is our life. We focus on the technical issues and the context doesn't matter, and we fall into a hole creating all of these kinds of difficulties. Okay? Agency, I'll do whatever you want. Paternalism, I'm the computer geek, I'll do whatever I want. Why do you have ethics? Because what you want to do is to avoid irresponsible research innovation. Okay? This is the fun stuff in the world. Buy yourself a drone, right? Google Glass. Look at the technology in both of those things. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? Would you be happy to have been on the team that developed Google Glass? I mean, we got that thing out in the world, and it works. It does what it's supposed to. Yeah. Should people wear Google Glass while driving? And watch the internet? I guess you've never thought about that one. We're going to make rules about you shouldn't have Google Glass while you're driving down. I know you don't have these things in Holland, but we have things called expressways and freeways and very fast roads in the US or in Germany and so on. What about Google Glass while you're in a classroom taking an exam? Can you be wearing Google Glass? Oh, okay. What about allowing people in children's museums wearing Google Glass which takes pictures? I know, I have to fall into this kind of trap. That was a pun. Used to wear Google Glass in public toilets. Can people wear? I mean, what are we going to do here? Well, when we talk about developing software, what we talk about is this third model called the fiduciary model. That is where both the user, both the client and the developer understand the problem, and they work together, committing the judgment and saying, you know, this may be risky doing it this way, you may not want to do it this way for the following reasons. And what you do is, in that discussion, it helps you reduce some of these issues about reframing a problem. Okay? What's the role of professional societies in all of this? Well, we've concentrated, ACM2, on factual knowledge. We're going to have a BOK called a body of knowledge. And you know what? At the back of the body of knowledge, in the appendix that nobody ever gets to, there's the code of ethics that says what you are responsible for in order to be a professional that exercises professionalism, okay? What you need to do to avoid some of the framing problems is do something called pre-commitment. Here's a recommendation. Have people, some people sign employment contracts, and I know some companies, software engineering companies, that have their people sign that they will follow the software engineering code of ethics in their practice. It's a little bit of a reminder. Now, if it was only a reminder 20 years ago when you started, there may be a bit of a problem there. Talk about ethical principles in clear terms. So IP3 talks about a checklist of codes and things like that. So that's one set of things you can do. Hello. There we go. Talk about things related to a profession, okay? Don't say, well, everything is relative. The people in Holland do things different from the people in Germany and different from the people in France. Say, you're an ICT professional responsible to your customer. Will you hurt your customer doing this? Well, I don't have to pay attention to that because I'm German. What? We talk about multicultural ethical beliefs. And what we want to talk about is ICT standards and professional obligations we have. These kinds of things, codes of ethics, they serve some useful functions. You know, code of ethics is useful if the society knows about it, because then they know you're giving me a line if you say I'm not responsible to do this, that it's not my job. And they know that, and they have good expectations. A code of ethics expresses the conscience of a profession. You know, they tend to be statements by the professionals that say, you know, this is what we expect of each other. This is as professionals. They're useful as a tool to look at, to say, what should I worry about here? And then if you get a litigious society like we have in the US, they're also useful. I've been expert witness in cases where, is that what a professional would do? Here's a standard, what do you think? Now, one of the things a professional society ought to do, I have a lot built into the word support, is to support codes of ethics, not simply state them and put them on their websites and they're buried there. The ACM has 2 codes of ethics, and if you want to find out what the general code of ethics is, at the bottom of every web page is a little thing in small print that says Code of Ethics. I'd like to do a Google Analytics on it sometimes and see how many times it isn't clicked on. Okay, you actually need to support things. Now, one of the things you can do in your Code of Ethics is to provide some decision-making procedures. So, built into the Software Engineering Code of Ethics are these common English language, non-legalistic, non-highly philosophical assertions of philosophical positions. Examine if you and your colleagues are treating other people with respect. Did you really think they were totally dumb when you built that system? Did you give them some options? Someone might call that Kantianism. How will the least empowered be affected by your decision? There's a philosophical label for each of these. But these are fairly English language that the people who speak English can try to follow. Okay? I'm going to do something a little strange here. That is finished within 5 minutes of where I was supposed to be. HR is human resources. Human resources hires staff based on things we tell them. If you go to Microsoft to be hired to work for them, they'll ask you all sorts of tricky programming questions and say, well, how would you program this in C++? What would you do if it was in C# instead of C++? How would you do this kind of thing? And you know what? That doesn't tell you whether you have a professional. If you're working for human resources, and what a good human resources agency does is not ask about simply these knowledge questions, these physical questions, these technical questions, and not about how fast they can code it. You know, don't take a lot of time doing this. Can you get this done by tomorrow? Yeah, I can make the font smaller by tomorrow. I can make the font larger by tomorrow. Oops. What they ask about is how will putting this font changing thing in a senior citizen center affect what you designed on the Kindle? That's all you had to ask. And a programmer who said, well, gee, I've got to make the keys bigger. Or when you write the telephone program that says, I'm pressing the digits. I'm an old guy. I got bad eyes. My phone makes me go click, click, click. And you know the phone disconnects because I took too long. It does. But that's, so ask these kinds of questions when you hire people. If you're a professional society, ask those kinds of questions when you're worried about whether somebody is a professional or not. Don't ask just about the C++ and so on. Okay?
No, but Google is I have to defend Google a little bit, because they are also checking out the googliness factors. The googliness factor. And
What? There are what?
The googliness factor. That's what they are asking as well. How much a candidate is compatible with googliness.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. But Google does no evil. They tell us that. I didn't say that. They tell us.
That's what I'm saying.
We're being videotaped, so we have to be careful the truths we utter here today. Okay. There are ways in which you're an industry. When I talk to industry, I talk about ways in which they make professionalism irrelevant. Here's way one. Allocate 60 minutes once a year to somebody coming to talk about professionalism. So your industry hires someone in called Don and brings them to India and says, give a talk on professionalism. We need you for 45 minutes. Once a year, okay? It doesn't matter. Put an annual column in the newsletter that says, there was this interesting article about ethics that appeared 5 years ago. Okay? Only have others, you know, people who don't work for your company, come in and talk about it. Don't mention ethics when I give you your annual performance evaluation. Only talk about the technical issues. Encourage, I'm working on at least one European Union project where I raise some questions and we're told, oh, we'll fix this later. Oh, wait a minute, you've got these web standards for the interface. And you know that's never going to happen, right? Ways to make it relevant. You know what you do with your workers? When you're working on this project and you say you're developing the interface, you say, are there any particular problems with this, like the colors that it's in? The type of font. Are you really using Times Roman font with black, intense color on a white background? Do you know that people who are dyslexic, because of the serifs on the Times Roman font, have difficulty and you can make them dizzy? Oh, well, maybe I ought to put some allocation there. I check out in a food market. Just last week, my wife managed to drag me shopping with her. And when you slide your card through the device, it says clearly in English, choose a language. Espanol, choose a language. And then there's the word Spanish and English. And it says it just that way, choose a language. Now, if all I spoke was Spanish, get them to worry about the decisions. And when someone says, you know, we can make a better product this way, and if we handle the ethics, say yes, and give them a raise, and make sure everybody knows about it. Encourage people to do all these kinds of things. Point them to evaluation techniques. Show them what sorts of processes there are, okay? Applied knowledge and professionalism. The ACM has as its logo, its motto, advancing computing as a science and a profession. This particular part needs support, which is more than the scientific skill set. What you've got to get people to do is to think about the way they're applied. You need to supply explanatory material, models of reasoning, give them concrete examples. Show them stuff that I did before, where when you got to that second screen on the font, most of you giggled. But you didn't giggle at the first screen. I would have messed up my talk a little bit, but I would have been very pleased if you had giggled at the first screen. Okay. Address the new technologies. And all this stuff that's going on with cell phones. I'm wearing hearing aids that transmit through my head to do wonderful things. They also have some problems that needed to have been technologically addressed. Okay? Why do all this stuff? What's the real value of professionalism that's being labeled as a professional who also understands its impacts and takes into account its social context and the ethical professionalism? Well, for those who are industry organized, you add value to the product. People are happier with it, it's get more use, you get less rework being done, you meet the obligations to those who are affected. And so you set the standards in which ICT is judged. Professional responsibility, professionalism. It's not about us, it's about our well-chosen actions and the impacts we have on others. Thank you. That's it.
Cool.
Thank you.